The old library was a quiet kingdom of whispered pages and dust motes dancing in the slants of evening light. Brittney, the sole ruler of this peaceful domain after hours, loved this time most of all. The silence was a comfortable blanket, broken only by the soft thud of a book being slid back into its proper home on the shelf. She hummed a little tune, pushing her cart slowly between the towering aisles, completely unaware that her quiet world was about to shatter. A sharp, scraping sound from the biography section made her jump. Her humming stopped. "Hello," she called out, her voice sounding small in the vast room. "Is someone there? We're closing soon." There was no answer, only the heavy, waiting silence. She told herself it was probably just Mr. Higgins, the old custodian, but a cold trickle of fear traced a path down her spine. She decided to finish up quickly, her movements becoming less leisurely, more hurried. As she turned the corner towards the front desk, a figure stepped out from the shadows, blocking her path. It was a man she recognized, a frequent visitor named Scott. He always had a nervous energy, but tonight, his eyes were wide and wild, like a trapped animal. "Brittney," he said, his voice a strained whisper. "I need money. All the cash from the register. Now." Her heart hammered against her ribs. "Scott, I can't do that. The register is already counted for the night." He took a step closer and she could smell the sweat on him. "Don't play games with me. You don't understand. I owe people. Bad people. If I don't pay them tonight." He didn't finish the sentence, but the terror in his eyes said enough. He grabbed her arm, his grip painfully tight. "Just open it." Suddenly, a new voice cut through the tension, calm and cold as a winter lake. "I believe the lady said no." Both Brittney and Scott spun around. Leaning against the doorframe of the history section was a man. He was tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in a simple but expensive-looking dark suit. He wasn't doing anything threatening, just standing there, yet his presence seemed to suck all the air out of the room. This was Jack. His gaze was fixed on Scott, and it held a quiet, terrifying power. Scott's face went pale. His grip on Brittney's arm went slack. "Jack, I can explain." "There's nothing to explain," Jack said, pushing himself off the doorframe and walking towards them with a slow, deliberate pace. "You were told noon today. You didn't have the money. Now you're here, frightening a woman who has nothing to do with our business." He stopped a few feet away, his eyes never leaving Scott's. "That shows very poor judgment." "I was desperate," Scott whined, taking a step back. "Desperate men make mistakes," Jack replied, his voice still dangerously quiet. "And mistakes have consequences. You will leave this library. You will never come near it again. And you will certainly never," he paused, his gaze flicking to Brittney's frightened face for a split second before returning to Scott, "ever lay a hand on this woman again. Do you understand me?" Scott nodded frantically, looking like he was about to be sick. He scurried around Jack and practically ran out the front door, the bell jingling madly as he disappeared into the night. Silence descended once more, but it was a different kind of silence now. It was thick and heavy, charged with the aftermath of what had just happened. Brittney stood frozen, her arms wrapped around herself, trembling. She looked at the stranger, this man named Jack who wielded fear like a weapon. Jack turned his full attention to her. The ice in his eyes melted, just a little, replaced by something softer, more curious. He saw the intelligence in her wide eyes, the kindness in her face, and the sheer, untouchable goodness that seemed to radiate from her. She was nothing like the people in his world. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice gentler now. She shook her head, unable to find her words. He took a step closer, not to threaten but to reassure. "My name is Jack," he said. "And I am sorry you had to see that. But men like Scott, they only understand one language." He looked around the peaceful library, then back at her, as if he were a wolf who had accidentally wandered into a church. "This is a dangerous city, Brittney. And now, because of what you saw, you are a part of my world." He moved closer still until he was standing right in front of her. He was so close she could smell his cologne, something dark and spicy. He reached out and, with a feather-light touch, brushed a stray strand of hair from her cheek. The touch was electric, sending a jolt through her whole body. It wasn't frightening. It was something else entirely. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper that was both a warning and a promise. "And you should know something about me, Brittney. Once I use my tongue on you, there is no escape." The strange words hung in the air between them. She didn't know what he meant, not really. But the way he said it, with such fierce certainty, made her knees feel weak. She should have been terrified. She should have run. But as she looked into his intense, captivating eyes, All she felt was a powerful, irresistible pull. Her trembling slowly subsided. She didn't run. She just looked at him, and in that look, she silently surrendered to whatever was beginning. Seeing this, Jack offered a small, rare smile. "Come," he said softly. "It's late. I will walk you home." And without another word, she picked up her bag, turned off the library lights, and walked out into the night with the most dangerous man she had ever met. The days that followed the incident in the library felt strange and new to Brittney. The familiar streets she walked to work seemed to hold a different energy, as if a secret layer had been painted over everything she knew. She tried to convince herself that the encounter with Jack was a one-time event, a terrifying blip in her normal, quiet life. But a part of her, a part that both thrilled and frightened her, knew it wasn't true. He had looked at her with an intensity that promised he was not a man who let things go. Her suspicion was confirmed on Thursday morning. As she approached the library's heavy oak doors, fumbling for her keys in the crisp morning air, a shadow detached itself from the building's facade. She gasped, her heart leaping into her throat before she recognized him. Jack stood there, looking impossibly out of place in his sharp, dark suit against the old stone of the library. In his hand were 2 paper cups from the expensive coffee shop 3 blocks away. "Brittney," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate in the quiet street. He held out one of the cups. "I thought you might need this." She stared at the cup, then at him. "How did you know how I take my coffee?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "It's my job to know things." Hesitantly she took the cup. Their fingers brushed, and another one of those strange electric jolts went through her. The coffee was perfect, just the right amount of cream and sugar. She didn't know what to say. "Thank you," she finally managed, her voice barely a whisper. "This doesn't mean you're safe," he stated, his tone matter-of-fact. "Scott is a coward, but cowards do stupid things when they're cornered. Until I am sure he and his friends understand the new rules, you will have a shadow. That shadow is me." And so it began. Jack became a constant, quiet presence in her life. He was there every morning with coffee. He was there every evening to walk her home. At first, their walks were silent, filled only with the sounds of the city around them. Brittney was too nervous to speak, and Jack seemed content to simply exist beside her, a silent, powerful guardian. She would sneak glances at his profile, at the sharp line of his jaw and the way his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, missing nothing. He was a predator walking through a world of prey, and he had decided she was under his protection. The silence broke slowly, one small question at a time. One evening, as they passed a small park, she gathered her courage. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "You're a busy man. This can't be a good use of your time." He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "The world I live in," he began, his gaze fixed on some distant point, "is built on violence and lies. It is ugly. When I saw you in that library surrounded by all those books, you were the complete opposite of that ugliness. You were calm. You were good. Protecting that feels like a better use of my time than anything else I could be doing." His honesty stunned her. It was the first time he had acknowledged what he was so directly. Another evening, as a gentle rain began to fall, he asked her about a book she was carrying. It was a thick, old novel about King Arthur. Her face lit up and she began to explain the story about knights and honor and doing what is right. He listened, truly listened, in a way few people ever had. He asked questions not to be polite, but because he seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts. In return, he shared tiny, carefully selected pieces of himself. He never gave details, but he spoke of a childhood with little comfort, of having to fight for everything he had, of building a fortress around himself because showing weakness was a death sentence. "I became hard because the world was hard," he said one night, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "It was the only way to survive." Brittney began to see the cracks in his armor. She saw the way his stern expression would soften when she got excited talking about a new story she loved. She noticed how he would subtly steer her to the inside of the sidewalk, away from the street, a small, instinctive act of protection. The fear she had felt began to transform, melting away like morning frost under a warm sun. It was replaced by a deep, growing curiosity, and something more dangerous, a profound sense of caring for this complicated, lonely man. The turning point came on a Friday night. They were standing on the steps of her apartment building, the usual end to their walk. The city lights twinkled around them, and a cool breeze rustled the leaves of the trees lining the street. "Thank you, Jack," she said, turning to face him. "For the walk. For everything." He looked down at her, his face illuminated by the soft glow of the street lamp. The usual guarded look in his eyes was gone, replaced by an open, raw emotion that made her breath catch. "You don't have to thank me," he said. "Being with you, hearing you talk about your books and your quiet life, it's the most peace I've known in years." He reached out and gently took her hand. His own hand was large and warm, enveloping hers completely. It was a simple touch, but it felt more intimate than anything she had ever experienced. He wasn't the Mafia boss in that moment. He was just Jack, a man holding her hand on a quiet city street. "I know my world frightens you," he whispered. "It should. But I need you to know that my promise to protect you has nothing to do with my business and everything to do with you. Just you." Brittney looked up at him, her heart pounding not with fear, but with a feeling so strong it overwhelmed her. She squeezed his hand gently. In that silent exchange, all the remaining walls between them crumbled into dust. She wasn't just trusting him to keep her safe from Scott. She was trusting him with a piece of her heart. The invitation came on a piece of thick, cream-colored paper, delivered not by mail, but by a serious-looking man in a suit who simply handed it to her at the library desk before melting back into the afternoon. It was not a request. It was an announcement. Jack was taking her to dinner at the Gilded Cage, a restaurant whose name she had only seen in society magazines, a place far removed from her world of simple diners and takeout. A flutter of nervous excitement mixed with a thread of fear twisted in her stomach. This was different from their walks home. This was stepping directly into his world, the one he had only spoken of in shadows and hints. What would she wear? What would she say to his friends, his associates? The questions swirled in her mind all day. That evening, Jack arrived at her apartment door not in his usual car, but in a long, silent luxury vehicle. When she opened the door, he simply stood there for a moment, just looking at her. She had worn a simple black dress, the nicest one she owned, and had taken extra care with her hair. "You look beautiful, Brittney," he said, his voice low and filled with a warmth that made her blush. The usual intensity in his eyes was softened by something akin to awe. The restaurant was everything she imagined and more. It was all soft lighting, gleaming silver, and the hushed murmur of important conversations. Men in exquisitely tailored suits and women in glittering jewels turned to look as Jack guided her through the room. Their eyes were not unkind, but they were assessing, curious. She felt like a rare bird that had flown into a room of hawks. She held onto Jack's arm a little tighter. But Jack never left her side. He pulled out her chair, his hand resting for a moment on her shoulder, a silent signal of possession and protection. He ordered for her, recommending dishes with names she couldn't pronounce, and when the food came he watched her take the first bite, a small smile playing on his lips as her eyes widened in delight. He introduced her to people who came to their table, not as Brittney from the library, but simply as Brittney. His tone made it clear that her name was all the introduction she needed. In this world of his, a world built on power and fear, he was treating her with a reverence she had never known. He was showing everyone that she was important. She was his. After dinner, instead of getting directly into the car, Jack led her to a small, private garden terrace attached to the restaurant. The city spread out below them like a carpet of diamonds, the sounds of traffic a distant hum. The air was cool and sweet. It was just the two of them under a canopy of a million stars. He turned to her, his figure outlined against the glittering skyline. "Did you enjoy your evening?" he asked. "It was incredible, Jack. Thank you." She hugged her arms against the slight chill. "It's just so different from my life. That's why I brought you here," he said, taking a step closer. "I wanted you to see a part of my world that isn't all darkness. I wanted to give you something beautiful." He was close enough now that she could see the starlight reflected in his dark eyes. The confident, powerful man from the dinner seemed to fade away, leaving someone more vulnerable, more real. "That night in the library," he began, his voice dropping to that intimate whisper that never failed to send a shiver through her. "When I saw you so brave and so scared all at once, I knew you were different. I told you that once I started there would be no escape. I meant it, Brittney. But it wasn't a threat. It was a warning for myself." He reached out and cupped her face, his thumb gently stroking her cheek. His touch was incredibly gentle, belying the immense strength in his hands. "I was the one who was trapped," he confessed, his voice thick with emotion. "From the moment I saw you, my heart was trapped. I've spent my whole life building walls and you walked through them without even trying. I don't want you to escape me, Brittney. I want you to choose me." Tears welled in Brittney's eyes, blurring the city lights into a beautiful haze. All the fear, all the uncertainty, melted away in that moment, washed clean by the raw honesty in his words. He wasn't asking her to love the Mafia boss. He was asking her to love the man. She didn't answer with words. She stood on her toes, closed her eyes and brought her lips to his. The kiss started softly, a tender question and a gentle answer. But as her arms wound around his neck and his tightened around her waist, pulling her flush against him, it deepened into something more. It was a kiss filled with all the unspoken words of the past weeks, all the longing, all the promise. It was sweet and passionate, desperate and loving all at once. She could taste the wine on his lips and the hint of a future she had never dared to dream of. In that kiss, she surrendered not to a dangerous man, but to the man she had come to love. When they finally broke apart, breathless, they simply held each other, the silent city their only witness. The promise had been made and her heart was irrevocably, completely his. The peaceful bubble that had formed around Brittney and Jack lasted for several blissful weeks. The memory of their first kiss under the stars was a constant, warm presence in Brittney's mind, a secret she carried with her through her days at the library. Jack was still her constant shadow, but their time together had transformed. The guarded conversations were replaced by easy laughter and quiet confidences. They held hands as they walked, and his protective gestures felt less like a bodyguard's duty and more like a lover's caress. She had never felt so safe, so cherished. This sense of security, however, was an illusion that Jack knew could not last. He had made a powerful enemy in Scott, and in his world, disrespect could not go unpunished. Scott, humiliated and desperate, had been whispering in the ears of other dissatisfied men, painting Jack as weak, distracted by a woman. The threat was no longer just about money, it was now a challenge to Jack's authority. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon. Brittney had left the library a few minutes early to run an errand at a small boutique a few blocks away. She was looking at a display in the window when a black van screeched to a halt at the curb. The side door slid open with a violent rasp, and two large men jumped out, their intentions clear on their faces. Brittney froze, her blood turning to ice. Before the men could take 2 steps, a different car, one she recognized as Jack's, swerved and blocked the van's path. 2 of Jack's men, who she now knew as Davis and Morgan, emerged with a calm, terrifying efficiency. The confrontation was short, brutal, and quiet. There were no shouted threats, just the sickening thuds of a struggle quickly subdued. Davis put a hand on her arm, his voice calm but firm. "Miss Brittney, come with us. Now." She was ushered into the back of Jack's car, her entire body trembling. They drove not to her apartment, but out of the city towards the rolling hills that lay beyond. Jack was waiting for her at a secluded, modern house surrounded by trees, a place she had never seen before. His face was a mask of cold fury, but the moment his eyes landed on her, the ice shattered, replaced by a raw, frantic worry. He crossed the room in 3 long strides and pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "Did they touch you?" he asked, his voice a low, dangerous growl against her hair. She shook her head, burying her face in his chest. "No. Your men, they were there so fast." His arms tightened around her. "I will always be there," he vowed, the words vibrating through her. "But this was because of me. Scott did this to get to me. He threatened what is mine." The word mine was not spoken with ownership, but with a fierce, primal protectiveness that shook her to her core. His anger wasn't just about business, it was personal. It was because someone had dared to threaten her. He led her to the living room, settling her on a large, soft sofa. He brought her a glass of water. His hands, which she had seen capable of such violence, were now incredibly gentle as he wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. "This is a safe house," he explained. "No one can find you here. You will stay here until I have dealt with this. Permanently." As night fell, the house grew quiet and dark. The fear of the afternoon slowly faded, replaced by a new, profound understanding. She had seen the true depth of his world's danger, but she had also seen the true depth of his feeling for her. Later, as they sat together in the dim light of a single lamp, the space between them filled with unspoken words and a powerful, pulling need. He reached out and traced the line of her jaw. "Are you afraid of me now?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "After what you saw today?" Brittney looked into his eyes, seeing the man who commanded armies of shadows, but also the man who brought her coffee and listened to her talk about books. She saw the killer and she saw the protector. And she loved them both. "No, Jack," she said, her own voice steady and sure. "I'm only afraid of a world without you in it." That was all the permission he needed. He leaned in and kissed her, and this kiss was different from the one on the terrace. It was not a question but a claiming. It was not a promise but a fulfillment. He kissed her with all the pent-up passion and fear and love of a lifetime, and she met him with a surrender that was anything but passive. It was a choice. That night, in the quiet solitude of the safe house, their love became real and complete. It was a slow, tender exploration, a conversation of touches and whispered names that sealed the bond between them. The world with all its dangers fell away, leaving only the truth they had built together. In the quiet darkness, wrapped in each other's arms, they were no longer a mafia boss and a librarian. They were simply Jack and Brittney, two souls who had found their home in one another, making a promise with their bodies that their hearts had already made. The outside world could wait. For now, they were the only two people that existed. The safe house became a secret world for Brittney and Jack, a peaceful bubble where the only sounds were the wind in the trees and their own soft voices. For a few days, the outside world ceased to exist. They cooked simple meals together, talked for hours on the sofa, and slept curled up in each other's arms, the horrors of the attempted kidnapping fading into a bad dream. But Brittney knew it was only a pause. The real world, with all its complications, was waiting for them just beyond the tree line. The knock on the door one morning was firm and official. Jack answered it, his posture immediately shifting from relaxed to guarded. A man in a neat but inexpensive suit stood on the porch, holding up a badge. "Jack, I'm Detective William. I'd like to speak with you. And with Miss Brittney if she's here." Jack let him in, his expression unreadable. Detective William was polite but his eyes were sharp, missing nothing. He sat at their kitchen table and explained that the police had been building a case against Jack's organization for a long time. They had Scott in custody and he was trying to make a deal. "Miss Brittney," William said, turning his kind but serious gaze to her. "We know about the incident outside the boutique. We know you've been thrust into a very dangerous situation. You don't have to be a part of this world. You can help us. Your testimony could be the key to putting the violence and the crime away for good. You could have your old safe life back." His words hung in the air, full of simple, logical promise. A life of quiet normalcy, free from fear and bodyguards and secret houses. It was the life she had always known. She could feel Jack tense beside her, but he said nothing. He was leaving the choice entirely to her. Later, after Detective William had left, Jack took her hands in his. They stood in the living room, the morning light streaming through the windows. "He's right, you know," Jack said, his voice heavy. "You could have your safe life back. You could walk away from me from all of this. I would make sure you were never bothered again." He took a deep breath, the most vulnerable she had ever seen him. "I love you, Brittney. I love you more than I have ever loved anything in my entire life. And because I love you, I will let you go if that is what you want. My world is dark and you deserve only light." Brittney looked at this powerful, dangerous man who was offering her his heart and her freedom in the same breath. She thought about her old life, the quiet library, the predictable days. It felt like a story about someone else, a character from a book she had closed a long time ago. Then she thought of Jack. She thought of his gentle hands, his quiet laughter, the way he looked at her as if she were the only person in the universe. She thought of the man who was willing to give up everything he had built, everything he was, just to keep a promise of a better life for her. She reached up and placed her hand on his cheek. "Detective William is wrong," she said softly, her voice clear and sure. "My old life wasn't safer, Jack. It was just emptier. It didn't have you in it. I don't want a life that's safe if it means a life without you. I choose you. I choose the man, not his world. And I believe the man can build us a new world." A look of profound relief and overwhelming love washed over Jack's face. He pulled her into a fierce embrace, holding her as if he would never let go. In that moment he made his final decision. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of quiet, secret movements. True to his word, Jack began to dismantle his empire. He used his cunning not for expansion but for extraction. He made deals, he settled scores, he transferred power in a way that would ensure a lasting, if uneasy, peace. He sold his legitimate businesses and used the money to start a new, completely honest venture, a security consulting firm that used his knowledge to protect people, not intimidate them. 1 year later, Brittney stood on the balcony of their new home, a bright, airy house with a view of the ocean, not the dark city skyline. Jack came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. The peace on his face was real and permanent. "It's finally over," he whispered. "The past is buried." She leaned back into his embrace, watching the waves crash against the shore. They had built a new life, a peaceful life on the foundation of their powerful love. The mafia boss and the librarian were gone, replaced by a husband and a wife who had chosen each other against all odds. Their love story had been a dangerous one, but in the end, it was their love that had saved them both. Their story proves that the strongest power isn't fear or control, but the courage to choose love, even when it's the most dangerous choice of all. This is the end of Jack and Brittney's tale, but if you enjoyed their journey and want to discover more stories where love conquers all, be sure to subscribe for more romantic adventures.